Last time when we left off, we just created the UI to the health bar. So now we can start creating our scripts. To contain our scripts, I would like to create a new folder. So I'm going to go to my asset folder, right click, create, and select a new folder. And here I'm going to call it scripts. Inside my scripts folder, I will have to create 3 scripts, and we are going to build them up step by step so that you will understand why we're creating the different things in the scripts and how the different functionality works. So first of all, we are going to create a new C# script, and this script is going to be called bar script. So this script will sit on our bar. The next script is going to be called player, so right click, create, and call it player. And the last script we are going to create is called stat, so right click, create, and C# script, and call it stat. Okay, now I call it stats. It should be called stat without an S, because it doesn't make sense to have a script with an S on it with like multiple name. So just stat. There we go. So remember player, stat, and bar script. When we have these scripts, we can start creating the functionality. First of all, our bar script needs to be attached to our health bar. So drag the bar script on top onto the health bar here. So we have the bar script sitting on the health bar, and then we can open up our script. And while we're waiting for that, there it is. So when the script is open, we'll need to add a new function, and the function is going to be called handle bar, and this function is basically going to update the bar at all times. So let's make a private void called handle bar. This function here needs to be called inside update because it needs to update the bar constantly. So instead of writing all the code inside update, I have chosen to create a function here, and we need to call it in update, so we just write handle bar. Might as well call it already, even though we haven't written the functionality, because maybe we're going to forget to put an update later. We will need to change the fill amount, because if you remember from before, if we select our content here, we have the fill amount, and this is what we are going to manipulate from within our script. So basically our bar here will have to have a fill amount. So in the top, we write private float fill amount, and this fill amount here needs to be set from our scripts. Right now we can test this out. We'll have to remove this code later, or actually we can let's just make this serialized. So above your fill amount, let's write serialized field. When you serialize a field, it is visible in the inspector. So if I save this and jump back out here and select my health bar, you'll see that the fill amount is visible here. Even though it is a private field, it's still serializable with this tag here. All public variables, if I would do like this, public int age, this is just an example, don't do this. Public int age, it will be visible in the inspector in a few seconds, as you can see here. But if I make it private, it is not visible anymore. If I click the right thing, if I saved, then it disappears, as you can see. Some of you might be asking now, well, why would you ever create a private field when you can just create a public field to expose it to the inspector? Well, the reason that I never create public fields like that is because it's a very bad practice to do, and I'm following the object-oriented principles when I'm coding. And one of those principles, called encapsulation, states that you should never create public variables just like that. Instead, you should expose your variables through properties or through functions or methods. And the reason that you're allowed to expose it through properties and methods is because that you can decide what happens to that variables through those properties and methods. And I'll show you later how we're going to do that. But for now, just keep in mind that we will never create public variables just like that, because it's bad practice, and everything else can access the variable when you do that. For example, if you have a game and you make the player's health public, well, nothing is stopping the enemy for changing the player's health then. for example. So now that we have our fill amount, we can actually start using it for something. First of all, we'll have to have access to our image with the fill amount on it. So we are going to make another private image, our private variable called image, type image. And if you don't have the image namespace, you can right click on it, quick actions, and click using Unity engine.ui. If you can't do that, you can simply go to the top here and write using Unity engine.ui here and implement the namespace. And we are going to call this content. So this is our content. Right now it's not exposed in the inspector, so we simply have to create it and make it into a serialized field as well. And let's save this. Keep in mind that the fact that this is a serialized field is only temporary. We only need it so that we can test stuff. When we are done with the whole thing, we are going to remove the serialized field here and just keep the variable private. So let's go to our handlebar, and down here we can say content dot fill amount equals fill amount. So this will access our content, take the fill amount of it, and set it equal to our fill amount. Let's try to save here, and I'll demonstrate in the inspector here. If you look at it, we have something called content here, and there is a fill amount on it. We are going to change that fill amount from our code like so that it changes the health bar. So if we take our health bar here and see we have the content here, we take the content from the health bar and drag it all the way down here. And then we say our fill amount is 1, for example. So if we play the game now, nothing is going to happen. No, let's do it without full screen. There we go. Everything should be fine. And if we change the value here, we will see that even though if we change our value on our bar script, it also reflects the fill amount of the content here. So what we are actually doing here is that we are accessing the images, which is called content dot fill amount here. So this fill amount here is actually what we are accessing right here. And then we're setting it equal to the variable in the inspector. Okay, so this is not very ideal for our game, because we can just say, we can go in here and change the fill amount. That there's no point. We need to make some health and stuff so that we can actually change it from somewhere, or we can make it reflect an actual value. So let's jump back into our script. And in here we'll have to create a new function called map. And basically map is going to take our health and translate the value of the health into a value that the fill amount can understand. Because if we have a look at it here, if we go to the content here, you'll see fill amount is a value between 1 and 0. So we need to make a function that can make sure that if we have 100 health, the value here is 1. But if we have 50 health, well, then it's 0.5. And if we have 10 health, then it's 0.1 and so on. So these values are fairly easy to understand when you're working with 100 health as the max value. But let's say if we have 230 health, then it suddenly gets more complicated to calculate that in your head. So we need to translate the fact that we have 230 health, for example, as a max value. So if we have 230 health, the fill amount should be 1. So, and if we have, for example, 200 and let's say 203 health, then the fill amount should reflect what 203 health is on a scale from 0 to 1. Hope this makes sense. Let's try to write the function, then maybe it's going to make more sense. So we are going to make a private function, and it's going to return a float. So we need to write float, so it returns this float here, and this should be the value between 0 and 1. Then we're going to call this function map, and it's going to have a float, and this is the actual value that we need to evaluate. So let's say we have, let's call value. If we have 210 health, then this value here is going to be 210. And then we're going to say float minimum in minimum, and we're going to tell this map function what the minimum, if I could say it, what the minimum value is that it can take in. So let's say our health, for example, can go from 0 to 230. Then in minimum will be 0 because that's the lowest value this function can receive. Then we're going to have an in maximum. So let's say float in max. And this is the maximum value that this function can receive. And it can be 230 if that's your max health, or it can be 100 if 100 is your max health. So this function will adapt to the accordingly to what your maximum health is. Okay. So now we have all the value we put into this function here that we need to evaluate. So we have the value, the actual value we can evaluate, for example, 50 health. The minimum value can be 0 and the maximum value can be 230, for example. Then we need to tell the function, well, we need to translate these values into a scale between 0 and 1, for example. So we can say outmax. So the maximum value we can return should be 1 later when we call the function. And then we are going to make a float, let's make it before here, float called in max. Outmax also. Let's call out minimum. If I could hit my keys. So out minimum, there we go. So the value we are evaluating, the current health basically, the minimum value the health can have, for example 0, that's pretty common. The maximum value that the player can have in health, for example 230 or 100. The values that we are translating this into, for example 0 to 1. So these are our fill amounts. Okay, so now we have set up our function. Now we need to return the right value. So to return the correct value, we will have to do a little calculation here. And we will write out the function to the end, and then afterwards I will explain you every single step of the way. So first of all, we'll have to return value minus in minimum. So that's the current value minus the minimum value we can get in, multiplied by out maximum minus out minimum, divided by in maximum minus in minimum, and plus out minimum. Okay, so this might be a little confusing, but let's take a look at everything step by step so that you will understand what's actually going on here. As I said, this function will take your current health and change that scale into a value between 0 and 1. So let's take a look at them step by step. Let's take two examples. Let's look at a simple example where we have 100 in health. Our max health is 100, the current health is 80, and our minimum health is 0. And then afterwards we can take a look at an example with a very odd number, so you can see that there's a point in making these calculations. Because 80 health on a scale from 0 to 100 is pretty easy to calculate in your head. It's 0.8 to get 80% of 1. But let's do it. Let's explain the example for a better understanding. So our value is 80 health, and the in minimum value we can get is 0 because that's the value when we're dead. We multiply this with out maximum, and our out maximum is 1 because we want to translate everything from 0 to 100 to a scale from 0 to 1. So our out max is 1 minus I minimum, out minimum is 0, divided by in maximum, our in max is 100 health, minus in minimum, which is 0, plus 0, because that's our out minimum. So let's do the calculations first. If we do it underneath here, the result of 80 minus 0 is 80. The result of 1 minus 0, well, that's 1. So we have 80 multiplied by 1. Then we divide with 100 minus 0, well, is 100, plus 0, which is 100. So that ends up with 80 divided by 100, which equals 0.8. So that was the simple one. Okay, let's try with a harder example instead of using these easy numbers here. Let's say that our player leveled up in the game and he has more health than 100. His maximum health is 230 at the moment, and his current health is 78. So our 80 here should be replaced with 78. That's the current value. In minimum is still 0 because he is dead when he has 0 health. We need to multiply by 1 because our out max is still 1 because we are translating into the value of 0 to 1, and minus 0 because out minimum is also 0. Okay, our in maximum is 230 because that's our new maximum health. Our in minimum is still 0, and our out minimum is also still 0 at this point. So let's bring in the calculator. First of all, 70 minus 0, that's 70. Multiplied by 1, well, that's also 78. I mean, not 70, 78. I think I said wrong. So let's say 78, if I click here, 78 divided by, multiplied by 1 and divided by 230 instead. So let's try one more time. We have our value here. We say 78 divided by 230, and that equals 0.339. So it's 0.339 we have to do. So in a situation where we have 230 health, our current health is maximum health is 230, our current health is 78, well, then our value should be 0.339 out here, so 0.339. So this is the exact value we will have, health we will have left if we have 78 health left when our maximum health is 230. So that is how this function here, map function, is going to work for us. So now we have that one in place, and we can continue with the tutorial. Some of you might argue that this can be done way easier when the minimum value is always 0. Well, maybe you are going to have some values where the minimum value is not always 0 in your game. So that's why I chose to create this function instead of doing some easy percentage calculation, so that you can actually adapt it to whatever you want to do. Let's say that your minimum value should be 30. Well, then this function of course also works. Anyway, we will have to use this function for something. Let's say that our content.fill amount is equal to, let's say map, and let's go here. Our value is at the moment, let's just call it, let's say we have 53 health, and our minimum is 0, our maximum is 100 health, our out minimum is 0, and our out maximum is 1. So if we save this, then we will have a bar that reflects whatever our health would be if we had 53 health left when we have a maximum health of 100. And as you can see, it goes a little below the middle, and that's 0.53 here. And we can try again with a harder calculation. Maximum health is 230, and we have that 78 left. Let's save it and jump back into Unity. And then you'll see it's 0.339 something. So now you have tested this, and we know that our map function actually works correctly. So now that we have that in place, I think I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we are going to use this for something useful. So now we have a bar we can change value on, and in the next video we are going to add some current stats, some real stats, and use them for something. Thank you very much for watching, and remember to subscribe to my channel, like my Facebook page, and please follow me on Twitter. Remember that InScope Studios is a community founded page, so all your support is very important to me. If you want to support me, you can do it in 2 different ways, and of course you will get something back for supporting me. You can support me on the Patreon page. If you do so, then you will get all my projects that I've created for my tutorials, and you can also get private tutoring and help. If you want to support me another way, you can also just get this project or any of my other projects by clicking the link in the bottom of the screen right here. Thank you very much for watching.